California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are joined by Mike Morrell. He's a member of the California State Assembly. And so I want to speak with you about prison realignment, our state prisons. They continue to be in the news. As you know, a court recently, they threatened Governor Brown with contempt, a 71-page brutal ruling, really chastising him for not decreasing the prison population. On the flip side, you have the legislature, Dems and Reaps, and especially Reaps, looking to reform realignment. What's the update on efforts to reform realignment?
You know, right now, it seems to be a lot of talk, but little action. I had a bill, AB 2.
AB 2?
Yeah.
How'd you get 2?
Well, you know what happens? I was first in line.
Literally?
First in line to submit my bill on the first day you could submit bills. And Assemblyman Alejo was behind me, and he just said, I would like to be number 1. And I said, step in front of me, buddy.
That's funny.
So he was grateful, and he got more of a charge out of it than I did, so I let him. But anyway, what happened, my bill, you know, there's approximately 2,700 what the governor says are nonviolent criminals, but they're rapists, child molesters, they're horrible, you know, they're convicted sex felons.
Right.
And there's 2,700 of them who are out on the streets that have cut off their ankle bracelets, okay? So they aren't exactly, they don't care about the rule of law.
And it's interesting you mentioned that because I've spoken with both Democrats and Republicans, and they've expressed tremendous concern about that issue. And apparently the reason they're cutting off those bracelets is because there's no deterrent. If they get pulled in for cutting off their bracelet, in many counties there's no space, so they just get turned back. So
one guy up in Stockton cut it off 6 times, his ankle bracelet, and he was in jail for 24 hours. Released. A couple of days later, he killed and raped his grandmother.
That's what we've heard.
Yeah,
we've heard.
So my bill is put these guys all back into prison. There is room in a sense that there's other programs we could cut. You know, we have over almost 600 government oversight agencies.
Here's the challenge, though. I hear you, and I believe that there's plenty of voice for fraud and abuse. But the governor is under this court order, and the court has made it very clear that if he does not release 9,000 prisoners, or I shouldn't say release, if he doesn't bring the prison population down by 9,000, they will hold him in contempt.
But it isn't bringing it down. It's we don't have enough beds. We need to be building some prison space. And we do have money to do that if we make our priorities right.
And let's talk about that. Because, if I may, during the Schwarzenegger administration, there was an allocation of $4 billion to build prisons. Mr. Brown put that on hold during the economic crisis, which allegedly has concluded. So is there a will to access that $4 billion to build state prisons?
Well, there certainly is on the Republican side. I don't know about the Democratic side. When my bill, unfortunately it was a partisan vote, my vote, AB 2 bill, said to put these guys back into prison where they belong, and it was voted down, unfortunately.
And the reality is, sir, that Democratic bills, Republican bills, any bill on realignment reform, down.
Well, here was the thing that was disappointed, is the bill that they came up with that Governor Brown, in my opinion, wants to endorse is one by Assemblyman Holden from Pasadena, which simply says we need to allocate more money to probation officers so they can keep a better eye and keep better track of these guys. And see, that's not, I think it's the first duty of an elected official is protect over the safety of the citizens, our men, women, our children. And so I think they need to go back to jail, not just have a probation officer keep on top of them.
But that begs the question, like you said, we need more beds.
We need more,
and so where do we go?
It's doable. There is the money there. You know, there's plenty of, there's inefficiencies, as you say, fraud, waste, and abuse.
But more importantly, there's that $4 billion.
There's the $4 billion. Yeah, there's the will there on my part, and why our friends on the other side of the aisle, their answer to me in committee that day is we want to give realignment a chance to work. But remember, the day they said that was going on 18 months, which is approximately a couple of months ago. So that's 20 months down the line, and crime is increasing. You talk to almost any sheriff or police, chief of police in most of the cities in California, there is a jump in crime. And they're the type of crimes like burglary of homes, car thefts, but because they know if they get caught, they're released. It's like catch and release.
But that, again, I keep going back to it. What is the state to do? when you have a court writing a 71-page blistering ruling that says that questioning the governor's good faith, indicating that they have exercised exceptional restraint in not holding contempt proceedings already. This is one angry court.
Yeah, well, but you prioritize things by building new jails with beds in it. That's the #1 priority, is get these guys off the streets, because our streets are not safe.
And I hear you, but I don't hear a lot of people talking about that. I kind of, well, I'm nothing special, but I kind of uncovered somewhere in some article that there was this $4 billion allocation that was put on hold. I mean, if that is the answer.
That is the answer.
Then where's the drumbeat on that issue?
Well, the drumbeat is coming from me. My bill right here. Tim Donnelly had a bill the same thing, and I think a number of Republicans were all 100% aboard on this.
But as you know, you need Democrats. It's undeniable.
You need Democrats. But one thing too, which I noticed, and I'm not saying this could be the reason, but in my analysis, I noticed I only had 2 oppositions, and I don't know if this was part of it who didn't like my bill, was the trial attorneys as well as the ACLU. So I don't know if they perhaps put pressure on the Dems to vote against my bill, but other than that, everybody else embraced my bill.
I mean, I'm sure, this is pure conjecture. It's simply the notion of we need to give realignment a chance. I mean, we have this court order.
Not a year and a half, though.
No, I hear you. Okay, let's talk more about this cycle. You've been in the legislature now for about 3 years.
2.5.
2.5 years. And the reality is that you have seen some of the worst of times, and arguably some of the best of times, relatively speaking. The state arguably is in surplus, arguably. What's your sense of where we are today vis-a-vis when you first walked in with $25 billion deficits, $42 billion deficits?
Yeah, I think we're still on life supports, because though we have a positive in our budget for the first time in years. Remember, there's sort of other accounting categories. You have CalPERS pensions, which my understanding, it's well over $200 billion unfunded. There was a report done by the Stanford Institute for Economics. It was called the Little Hoover Commission.
Oh, of course.
They got together with them and the Irvine, I think it was the Irvine Foundation. Could have
Be
my
that
facts
as it
wrong.
may, right.
Be that as it may. They said that CalPERS, as well as CalSTRS, which is the public employees, as well as state teachers, are going to have to earn an average of over 12% over the next 15 years.
That'd be nice.
To be able,
that'd be nice. I'd like to earn that.
I'd like to earn that too.
Right.
But chances are that's not going to happen. And so again, not only is CalPERS upside down a lot, but so is CalSTRS by about $140 billion.
We have seen a modicum of pension reform in the last few years.
Well, for new people.
Time, right?
But for new people,
we can't go backward. We know that courts have said that.
Yeah.
But is there a will to go back to look at pensions?
Well,
or there's not much we can do because
there's not much we can do. But I think this bankruptcy of
San Bernardino
is going to tell a lot. Depending on what the courts decide. And one of the things I think we should pay our bills. And I don't like to see bankruptcy. Because it hurts us.
You represent portions of San Bernardino.
And it hurts us in other ways. It hurts us on lending, business loans. People want to buy real estate. The lenders aren't going to want to loan there, so they're going to lowball appraisals. They're going to tighten lending criteria.
Let me ask you, if I may, because you do represent significant portions of San Bernardino County. Are you seeing a turnaround? I mean, I know you've worked in real estate yourself as well.
Yeah, I'm seeing a turnaround. Not like we'd like, but yes, a small turnaround. But there's pockets. The actual city of San Bernardino is still hurting, but
tough.
Like Redlands that surrounds it, Loma Linda, Highland, Rancho Cucamonga, Fontana Rialto, they're coming back in a strong way, and parts of San Bernardino. But still, we have to get. We have some great infrastructure in San Bernardino, but what we need to do is get jobs there. We got great freeways and airport,
the new Amazon
railways,
distribution center.
Amazon, yeah. So there are some things happening, but getting back to your question on retirements, depending on which way that bankruptcy goes, you could see a lot. I know what I was trying to say.
No, please.
The reason I was concerned if San Bernardino does file bankruptcy, and if the courts weigh in on their favor regarding retirements, you're going to see city after city after city topple that. Yeah.
His name is Mike Morrell. I'm Brad Pomerance. This is California Edition. Welcome back. It's Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are joined by Mike Gardner. Mike is a member of the Riverside City Council. He's also chair of the California Seismic Safety Commission. So the news that San Onofre nuclear power plant was shutting down was relevant to you in both roles that you hold.
It is, because the city of Riverside has a municipal electric utility, and it owns 1.7% of the San Onofre power plant.
Wow. And then, of course, as the Seismic Safety Commission head, there's always a concern about whether nuclear power is being operated in such a way that if there is a seismic event, there won't be significant release.
Right, and particularly after the events in Japan,
right.
The Public Utilities Commission has asked the Seismic Safety Commission to assist in some review of whether there are any risks to the two nuclear power plants in California.
And of course, there's San Onofre and Diablo Canyon in San Luis Obispo County. I must tell you, sir, I was shocked by the news recently that San Onofre was going to shut down. We know, just to remind our viewers, that in January of 2012, the plant was shut down because there had been some leaks of radiation, but it seemed as if Edison was really pushing forward to at least keep one of the units open at partial capacity. What's your sense?
Well, I've not had a chance to speak with Edison yet, but it has to be an economic decision that Edison, as plant manager, has made. The problem with the plants was in the steam generators, where you run hot radioactive water through one side of the steam generator, and it flashes clean water to steam, which generates the electricity.
Right.
And there were some problems with new steam generators that caused a leak. A couple of tubes ruptured, and it allowed a very small amount of radioactive water to get mixed with the clean water.
But then we heard that upon inspection, there were other tubes that had either leaks or near potential for leaks.
There was much more wear on the tubes than there should have been, given the amount of time. They were only a couple of years old.
Right. There are so many elements to this story. The first being, since this was as a result of new, I'll call it hardware for lack of a better term, that went in, the lawsuits between Edison and Mitsubishi, who was the entity that put in those new tubes, have to be quite dramatic. Then there's the question of the energy itself. I mean, Riverside, like you said, how many megawatts were you getting from?
It's about 35 megawatts.
Is that a lot?
Riverside. It's significant. Our peak load is just a little over 600 megawatts, so it's not a huge percentage, but it was very reliable power all these years up until the problem with the steam generators.
And when we think about nuclear energy, to some it's the new green, because as long as nuclear runs without any leaks, it's very clean.
It is.
And so, you know, we have Diablo that's operating. Now we don't have San Onofre. I think the state was reliant upon nuclear energy. Was it for about 10% of its energy? Maybe even about 16%. I mean, in 2010, 16% of the state's energy was nuclear-based, with a little more coming from Diablo than San Onofre. So we've lost, about 7-8% of our energy source.
Although we haven't had it, we didn't have it last summer.
That is true.
We anticipated we probably wouldn't have it this summer. So in the short term, all of the utilities, Edison, San Diego Gas and Electric, and Riverside, who rely on San Onofre, have made arrangements for replacement power. But in the long term, 2 years out, 3 years out, we all will need to secure replacement
But as
energy.
I understand, some of that replacement power comes from sources that may not be as green.
That is absolutely the case.
As nuclear can be when it's running properly.
We haven't, in the country, we've not built a new nuclear power plant in a long time. We've not built any significant new hydroelectric plants. The new solar plants are coming online. They're fairly good size, so that will help. Geothermal, there's not a huge amount more to tap. Wind is a growing industry, but again, the low-hanging fruit has already been picked.
What about Diablo Canyon? Is it time for them to try to increase their capacity, or are they generating as much as possible?
I believe that those two units are operating at full capacity. It would require significant investment in lots of new things to increase the capacity.
I want to go back to San Onofre, because even though the plant is shut down, there's still radioactive materials there.
Right.
We've had a lot of questions about disposal of radioactive materials. There had been a move to dispose at Yucca Mountain in Nevada. That's not going to happen. There's some disposal being done, I believe, on site. These spent fuel rods, putting in cooling pools or whatever it may be. The bottom line is, it doesn't feel as if the nuclear industry in the United States, let alone California, has found a solution for radioactive disposal. So where do we go from here?
That's true, and it's not just the industry, it's our entire society. The federal government was charged with, by federal statute, was charged with developing a permanent disposal facility for nuclear fuel. That has not happened.
No.
So
and it's not going to happen in Nevada. I mean, it's clear Nevada's dead.
I don't believe it's going to happen anywhere. It's going to be very difficult. No one wants that.
So what do we do? I mean, do we just
you're looking
dry
at,
cast? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, you're looking at long-term storage at the power plant sites. Now, in a couple of instances, I believe, where plants have been decommissioned, the fuel has been moved off-site ultimately and is stored elsewhere. But we don't have a permanent disposal facility, and that has always been an issue for the nuclear industry.
So what happens with the site that is San Onofre? I mean, those two, I'll call them humps, are quite iconic as you're driving between LA and San Diego. Beautiful beachfront property. I mean, we're obviously early in this discussion, but so what now? What next?
I think early on, assuming that the units really are to be decommissioned, they'll remove the fuel from the reactors, and it needs to be kept in a circulating water pool to continue to cool the fuel, because it does still generate heat.
Really?
There are pools on site.
For that long?
Yes. Well, not permanently, but for some period of years. Then it can go into what they call the dry cask storage when it has decayed to a certain point. At the moment, it's my understanding that at San Onofre, all of that spent fuel storage is down at the main plant level. They have other facilities up on a mesa above. I don't think there is a large tsunami risk at San Onofre, but to the extent there is a tsunami risk, you have the same concerns with spent fuel that is in the pools as you do with active fuel that's in a reactor. If you can't keep it cool, you can have a problem.
Now, like you had said earlier, Riverside Public Utility owns 1.7% of San Onofre.
Right.
I mean, where do you go from here? You're an owner of, you've lost an investment. I mean, this is a financial loss, no?
It is a financial loss, and we also will have a new expense in long-term replacement of that power. That, I'm afraid, will drag out in the courts for years.
Who else owns? Do you know?
Yeah, there are three owners of San Onofre. Southern California Edison is the biggest piece. They have, if I remember correctly, 80%.
Okay.
San Diego Gas and Electric has about 18%, and Riverside has 1.7%.
How did Riverside get involved? Do you know the history of it?
Back at the time the units were being built, Edison was looking for other investors.
And was this in the 50s or even
no,
before?
it was they actually were being built in the 70s, I believe, came online in the 80s.
Okay, so are lawsuits pending or about to be filed? I know you can't...
I suspect ultimately, I mean, we'll all have to sit down and talk. All the owners will have to sit down and talk. But Edison is the
Did you
plant.
know in advance this was going to happen?
I did not.
Really?
First I heard was on the television this morning.
Was that appropriate?
I would rather have heard internally, but I understand why Edison may not have picked up the telephone and talked to our utility director and said, by the way, we're not going to turn that plant back on.
But Riverside's a partial owner, be it a small part.
We are, but Edison is the plant operator, and it's their sole jurisdiction what to do with the plant by contract.
I understand. Okay, his name is Mike Gardner. He is a member of the Riverside City Council. He is also the chairman of the California Seismic Safety Commission. My name is Brad Pomerance. You've been watching Charter California Edition. Welcome back to Charter California Edition. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Jim Perry. He was recently elected to the Riverside City Council. Sir, I'm not sure what to say. There were 6 people running in a primary. You needed 50% plus 1 to win outright. You got almost 61% with 6 people running, with the local paper endorsing an opponent. How did you do it? How did you do it?
We had a plan, we had a message, and we went out and we worked extremely hard.
You know why I believe you? You're very tan. You are very, very tan. And in
Yes,
Riverside, you could get tan walking precincts. And you walk the walk.
We knocked on almost 9,000 doors. When we were planning and organizing this campaign, it isn't that the word was banned from our meetings or from our organization, but the word runoff never came up.
Interesting.
We put our minds on working this thing as hard as we could, as long as we could, and we'd work it up until the very last moment.
And there's another race where there will be a runoff in the city of Riverside. In that race, the 2 top candidates got, I think, 43% and 32% or something like that. When you were walking, I want to get a sense what the voters were saying to you, because Riverside, in so many ways, is a microcosm of a lot of cities in California. It's a city that did very well in the last decade, really has suffered during this economic downturn, but is turning around nicely, especially compared to other cities in the Inland Empire like our friends in San Bernardino who are going through bankruptcy. But be that as it may, give me a sense what your voters said to you.
It kind of went into a couple different segments.
Please.
One, we had to educate them that there was an election.
Oh, that's a good point.
We just came off a presidential election. People were not expecting an election quite this soon. Then we discovered we were having to educate people, even though it was a mail-in ballot and people were receiving ballots in the mail. We had to educate them on that as well, because as late as the Sunday and Monday before election, we would knock on doors and literally talk to people who said they were going to the polls on Tuesday.
They couldn't.
And they couldn't.
They could drop off the ballot, is that correct?
Yes, and most of the time, once we explained to the potential voter that they came a few weeks before and they were in this large white envelope, we tell them, go check your junk mail, go check your bills.
It is junk mail to many, but be that as it may.
And the amazing thing was, a couple times, there was probably 3 times where I actually left the home, was walking down the street, and the next thing I knew is I had this potential voter running out the front door, running out down the street after me, and waving their flag and saying, I think I found it, I think I found it.
It's a golden ticket.
And they'd walk up to me and they'd go, is this it? And
it's that simple.
It was that simple, and we made the connection with them, and I had a few of them who actually tore it open and voted right then and there.
That's crazy. What were their fears, what were their hopes, though, in terms of their city?
They want fiscal responsibility. They want infrastructure improved. For many of these residents, they're living on streets that haven't been repaved in many, many years. And that became a central theme of my campaign.
But what's interesting is, and I'm saying this as someone who looks from the outside as a journalist, Riverside in a lot of ways has done quite well in terms of fiscal responsibility during this downturn. And I hate to pile on our friends in San Bernardino, but it's an example. It's 20 minutes down the road and they're bankrupt. And, you know, the cities are not, I mean, they are different, but, you know, similar economic bases at some level. And Riverside has weathered the economic storm. I mean, you go down, is it Van Buren? There's the bridge widening. I mean, there is infrastructure projects. The Renaissance happened really during the recession. So Riverside has managed.
We have managed, and we've done a good job fiscally. And sometimes we had to educate the voters that we had a healthy reserve. But also on the west side, in Ward 6 and 7 that are on the west side of Riverside, you get into some of these neighborhoods and there are streets that are
and more economically challenged,
and economically challenged, and we have a high poverty rate. And they wanted assurances that people were going to pay attention to their needs and their quality of life.
I must ask you about your predecessor, who did not run for re-election. For those that live in Riverside or even anywhere in the Inland Empire, the name Nancy Hart is a well-known name. She's a force.
Yes,
she is an absolute force, revered by Democrats and Republicans. She voluntarily chose not to run for re-election. She did endorse you.
Yes.
And, you know, I asked Rusty Bailey a similar question when he was succeeding Ron Loveridge, also a force. That's the mayor of Riverside, Rusty Bailey. How is it that you are succeeding Nancy Hart, a force of nature?
I tell people I've been elected to the position because in my mind there's no replacing Nancy Hart.
Okay.
Those are some pretty big shoes to follow. I refer to her as the Queen of Hearts.
I like it.
She's a leader, she's a motivator. She's done great things for this community. And I ran on getting elected as opposed to telling people that I was going to replace her because I didn't feel replacement was the correct terminology to use.
How important do you think her endorsement was? Because she did endorse you early. I mean, real early.
She endorsed me well over a year ago. She's been behind me from the very beginning, and I appreciate that a great deal.
Mm-hmm.
And there are portions of this ward where she's extremely popular.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt about that. So let's talk about the future. You had been in law enforcement for many years.
Yes.
You retired, I think it was in 2008.
Yes.
And you've been quite active in Riverside as kind of a volunteer member of the community. What are your goals as you enter the city council?
My goals is pretty much what I campaigned on. I am going to provide this city and my constituents with a proactive, energetic form of representation. I've earned their trust to get elected. I got to continue to earn their trust and respect that I'm going to be there when they need me.
I also want to get a sense from you about if you are planning to look outward. And the reason I say that is, let's look at Ron Loveridge, for example. He was the mayor for, 20 years. He was quite the mayor. I mean, he was the president of the League of Cities for the United States. This is a man who really put Riverside into the forefront, and a man who was able to increase Riverside's stature because of his involvement beyond Riverside's boundaries. As an elected official of Riverside, you do have an opportunity to get involved in regional boards, in state boards. I recently interviewed Mike Gardner, who's a colleague of yours. He's president of the California Seismic Safety Commission, of all things. Are you going to be looking to get involved in regional organizations, state organizations, federal?
I think I have to continuously evaluate what I'm doing and work as an ambassador on behalf of Riverside. And that's going to include local, regional, state, and perhaps reaching out to federal officials to help determine the needs of Riverside and bring the resources we need here in this city and this region.
I want to speak with you about election night, if I may. Forgive me, indulge me, but I'm always fascinated by those that run for office and kind of the moment when they realize they have been successful. Because running for office is a very big deal. The way I would say it is, in a lot of ways, candidates are metaphorically naked. I mean, literally, I mean, you have just bore your soul. You're walking house to house to house. You are asking people for their trust. And, you know, it's the ultimate in sixth grade popularity contests. And so tell me about that moment when you looked at the screen. I think there was a picture of you in the paper.
Yes.
When you looked at the screen, and there it was.
Well, you know, it's interesting. We have to back up just a little bit.
Please.
8 o'clock was approaching, and the home we were at, I was in the backyard. And then, to be honest with you, I don't even remember who I was standing with.
Fair enough.
And they go, well, shouldn't we go inside? Because they're going to be posting results here quickly. And I go, trust me, we know when it's going to happen, because we're either going to hear screams of excitement
from inside,
or we're going to hear,
oh yeah, oh no. Right.
And the next thing I know is there's screams and the hoopla. And I literally walked in the back door of the home we were at, and I actually just stood there and watched people in excitement yelling and screaming.
And it's you.
And
it's
it's
excitement
me.
for you, not for... Because
yes.
I'm sure you've been involved in political campaigns. You're always excited for someone else.
Yes.
But now it's exciting for you.
And then it hit me. I pulled this off.
You did. What's your wife's name, if I may ask?
Kathy.
What did Kathy do? What did Kathy say?
She's been the strongest supporter behind this, and I think she was more happier than I was.
I actually recently, I emailed Gil Garcetti, who is the father of Eric Garcetti, who was elected to the mayor of Los Angeles, and I said, I'm most happy for you. Because I can't even imagine being a spouse, a parent, a child of a victorious candidate. It's got to be really terrific.
It's an exciting time, and it's a feeling.
Right. Well, congratulations.
Thank
You'll come back?
I'll come back.
His name is Jim Perry, Riverside Councilman-elect. I'm Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on Charter California Edition.